On this Monday evening, the 28th of August, we've got hurricane warnings for because of Adalia for the Florida West Coast. We've got tropical storm watches up now for the Florida East Coast and extending up further north into the southeast. A major Hurricane Franklin, the first major hurricane of the season. Lots of rough surf will be produced in the along the eastern seaboard over the next couple of days, and that will probably lead to some coastal flooding and even some beach erosion. We have the outlook for the Labor Day holiday weekend, which is the last vacation weekend, technically, of the summer season. We'll talk about that and more, and that's all coming up right now on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon. New York, they've got mulch, topsoil, sand. This winter they have salt and everything you need to get through a tropical storm or hurricane to make sure you are safe. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video, and if you decide to purchase this or anything else from the Tempest website, because they have a lot of other gadgets and gizmos and smart weather fashion, use the coupon code I want a weather station, because you really do want one. And if you do, what do you get, Joe? It's so exciting.
You get 10% off. And this message is to my wife, who's upstairs above me in the kitchen. Guess who's visiting my office as I speak to you now?
Oh.
He has four legs, a waggy tail, and he's sniffing around.
And he's barking.
And he's barking.
Unlike mine, who's laying along the side of the bed behind me like he usually is for every show. And what does he do? He sleeps.
Yes, and here comes my dear wife.
He must have been a critic in a previous life.
Well, you know, my Yorkie. I used to have my Yorkie in my office quite a bit, and he would lie down on the other chair over here, and he would just kind of like JJ, you know?
Yeah.
He's just like,
Yeah, he's at it again.
But this one likes to run around the house and explore. And even though we have a gate upstairs, which supposedly is to keep him from coming downstairs, every once in a while he's able to push the gate off to one side, and I can hear the. Are we having a battle now? A battle royale. All right. Well.
All right. Okay. So welcome everybody to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. Welcome to everybody on the chat board. Big hi, big hugs. And Ken Musillo's the first to hit the Super Chat tip jar. Thank you, Ken. Those of you watching for the first time, welcome. If you like the show, do please hit the like button, because Joe and I love it when we go over 100 likes. It just makes us happy. And be sure to just subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn your notifications on for the Joe and Joe Weather Show, because we are on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays we're off unless there's something major going on, in which case we will schedule a show. So we've got the first major hurricane of the season with Hurricane Franklin. It also goes to show you have to be a little careful with what models show as far as how low the pressure gets, because most of the models were off by about 30 or 40 millibars. It's down at 937 millibars. The sustained winds 145 miles an hour. So it's a pretty solid Category 4 hurricane. And before we get to everything that's going on in Florida, which we will do shortly, we should mention that with Franklin, this is not going to be a problem for the East Coast in terms of rain and wind. And it's going to turn to the northeast and be an ocean storm. However, a major hurricane taking the track that this one is going to have an impact to the ocean seas, and we are going to have rough surf to deal with. This is a big vacation week, so a lot of you folks are at the beaches, so just bear that in mind. And it's probably, we got a full moon, Joe, Wednesday night, so that probably means if we still got some big waves going on Thursday or even into early Friday, there's probably going to be some coastal flooding and some beach erosion as well. So just wanted to get that out there.
Yes, and in addition to the fact that it's a full moon, it's a super full moon. In fact, it's the closest full moon of the 2023 year, and because of that, being close to the Earth, the pull of the tidal forces are going to be a bit stronger than they normally would be at a spring tide or astronomical tide situation. So that doesn't bode well. I noticed, Joe, that up here in the New York metropolitan area, that the National Weather Service in New York or in Upton has already issued coastal flood advisories or statements for places right along the coastline of Nassau County, southern Nassau County, and also in other southward facing coastal locations as well. And that's not even with a storm. That's because the tides are going to run much higher than normal at the time of local high tide. So now you have a scenario where you've got a big storm out over the ocean, pushing water in waves or swells onto the shore and coastal areas. That's only going to aggravate the flooding situation. And down in the Florida area, boy, I tell you, that's the last thing that you need is abnormally high tides, even without a storm. Now you got the storm with Adalia, and it's going to be rough. It's going to be not a very good situation over the course of the next few days. Couldn't have come at a worse time, but this is, again, the closest full moon of the year, and it looks like it's going to be causing some problems, some real problems along coastal locations over the course of the next several days.
All right, so we'll come back to Franklin in a second. Johnny Quest, thanks for hitting the tip jar. And Johnny asks, will Hurricane Franklin change the overall weather pattern farther down the road? I tend to think not, but we'll come back to Franklin and I'll address it in a few minutes. So here's the latest visible satellite loop of Adalia. I keep wanting to say Vidalia because the cooking in me is thinking Vidalia onions for whatever reason. But all day long, Joe, I've noticed, there's been a consistent bursting of convection. The storm is taking on a much more circular appearance. There's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft. We'll check for some OBS shortly that's going in there. It's borderline hurricane from the last advisory, so it could very well have picked up that extra 5 miles an hour. In order to get to the technical status of a hurricane. The Hurricane Center in their discussion this morning, if you had anybody didn't read it, go back and read it, because if you watched the show last night, I sent a message to Joe Rayo today because I read that discussion. This was like the first thing I did this morning. I wasn't even out of bed. I grabbed my phone and I was reading the technical discussion, and I'm reading what the guy was saying, and I said, this guy watched the Joe and Joe weather show last night. I mean, they all just stop. I mean, whatever they're doing, they just stop. Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m. to listen to what we have to say. Because when he started talking about the 200 millibar map, which is what I pulled up, and the troughing, the deep trough that was going to drive down to the western Gulf of Mexico, I just laughed out loud. It was a great way to wake up in the morning. All right, this is serious, so let's get to this. So just going back to what I said, Joe, right now, we don't have that rapid strengthening setup at this moment, but by starting tomorrow morning, that trough is going to drop down into the western Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to start to create that very, very dynamic outflow setup over the hurricane, which will probably drive it to strengthen rapidly. And we saw today, overnight and into this morning, what happened with Franklin, where we saw this massive pressure drop. At one point, the pressure dropped something like 5 or 6 millibars in about 2 hours. I mean that's a pretty healthy rapid strengthening trend, and I think we're going to see this tomorrow when this thing is further north into the eastern Gulf.
Yeah, and let's not also forget that the water temperatures of the Gulf are pretty much like bathtub the equivalent, close to 90 degrees. And you put any kind of tropical system over that, and that certainly is going to help to add to the potential strengthening. And they've got it up to before landfall, Joe. They now have it up to a Cat 3, and don't be surprised if this thing even surpasses that, and maybe even gets to near Cat 4. It's going to be a very, very dangerous situation, especially around the Big Bend area of western or northwestern Florida, between the northern Florida and Panhandle area. That area at sea level is averaging somewhere like 5 to 7 feet above sea level, and they're talking about storm surges of something like 7 to 12 feet. So if you happen to live near, even within a mile or two of the coast, that water is just going to rush forward, 7, 8, 10, 12 feet. And again, if you're only about 5 or 8 feet above sea level, you got big problems, because that's going to cause some major, major flooding concerns. And I mean, admittedly, in that part of Florida, it's probably the least populated area of Florida, but there are still places and towns and communities who live there, and anybody who's in that vicinity, it's going to be really rough.
Yeah, I drew a red line about where the Big Bend is. It runs from north of Tampa St. Pete to east of Panama City. So it's that part of Florida that just kind of bends around from south to north and then goes east to west. So they call that the Florida Big Bend. They call this area here in Texas, for example, they call that the Coastal Bend of Texas. So just in case you didn't know where the Big Bend of Florida is, you learned so many things here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. One of the things on the satellite loop that I just noticed now too, Joe, is the fact that you could really start to you're at the beginning of this. We were looking at that 200 millibar level, which is up at about way up at 30,000 feet, and you could sort of see the beginnings of that trough that's up there, and it's going to dig down not that far to the south, but far enough south that it creates this massive outflow jet that Adalia is going to get into, and that is going to help facilitate the rapid strengthening. Wind shear is going to be light, so there's not going to be a wind shear problem, as Joe mentioned. We're talking about ocean water temperatures that are well up into the 80s. There are pockets out there in the eastern Gulf of Mexico where the water temperature is up around 90. Now, one other thing, Joe, as this starts to approach the coast, later Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, as it's making landfall, it's going to be accelerating. So there's going to be a little bit of momentum here as this system strengthens, moving at maybe at about 20 miles an hour, maybe even a little bit faster than that when it comes on shore, and that's going to have an impact in terms of the wind gusts.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, that's why forecasters initially underplayed Wilma some years ago. They were looking at it and said, well, it's a category 1 or maybe a category 2. But Wilma was moving at like 35 or 40 miles per hour. The forward speed, when you factor in, as you just mentioned, Joe, the forward speed into the wind speed circulation of these kinds of systems, and the same holds true also, I might add, for the great Long Island hurricane of 1938, which was accelerating at an extremely rapid pace, up to 40 or 50 miles an hour. You get these rapid storms kind of propagate very quickly, the forward speed. That you factor that into the strength of the storm as well, and that can make for a very, very dangerous situation. So, as if the intensification due to the interaction of the 200 millibar trough and also the very warm Gulf of Mexico waters, if that's were not enough, the forward speed is going to make this a very dangerous situation for those who live near and along the path of this storm as well.
I've got the GFS up. Just want to acknowledge Frank Karajat. I'm going to say Karajat. Hitting the tip jar twice, and very generously so. Thank you, Frank. Most appreciated for doing that. All right, so here's the 200 millibar map for Wednesday morning. And you see that deep trough that's running from Missouri all the way. This actually digs down pretty far south into the southwest Gulf of Mexico. And Idalia, of course, is coming up into the eastern Gulf on the east side of this trough. And again, the important thing here is the fact that the presence of this deep trough, it's not the trough so much, it's the fact that it's dug down all the way uh, pretty far south into the southwest Gulf of Mexico. That's really important because that takes away the shear. If that were a broad trough, that would create shear issues. But because it's a sharp trough that goes down into the western Gulf, and the fact that Idalia actually has its own anticyclone or high over it, the upper air wind conditions are ideal for rapid strengthening. Now, all of the mechanics are there. It seems that all the dynamics are there. So let's, everything points to the fact that this thing should deepen fairly quickly. We'll see of how we'll see what happens once we get to maybe at this time tomorrow night. I think we'll have a pretty good idea of where this is going with regards to the rapid deepening.
Now, Frank R. on the chat board, and he mentions what I had just mentioned a few minutes ago. Cedar Key only has a population of 700 people, so at least it's coming into a not very populated area. That may be true, Frank, but what happens if you're among the 700 people? I mean, this is bad news for you. Whether or not it's just one person, 700 or 70,000 people, there are going to be people who are going to be impacted significantly, if not adversely, with this storm. So we only hope the best for whoever it happens to be in and around the Big Bend area, because this is going to be a very devastating storm system when it's all over, said and done, for at least that section of Florida.
We should mention, Joe, that there is still some spread in the models, in the global models, as to where this winds up. The GFS is the furthest left, which is odd because usually it's the European that's the one that's the furthest left. And it has it going inland very close to just east of Panama City and right over Tallahassee and then moving up into southern Georgia. Now, it's got a little bit more of an inland track. Eventually, it just kind of translates its way eastward. Once it gets up into southeast Georgia, it starts to turn more to the east and comes offshore somewhere between Charleston and Myrtle Beach. It's a much weaker system. Now, to the right of that, you can see, and Joe Z pointed out in the chat board, so you may have already seen the Recon that's going out into Franklin. He said it's down to 926 now, 926 millibars, which is lower than Ian was from last year. But the GFS has got the models don't have like, it's in the 970, so it can't even handle what's going on. And that's surprising to me because we have seen over the years how the models, the global models, like to spin up these Category 5 hurricanes, and it's sort of done. Now it's kind of the opposite. It's going back to the old days where it never really grasped the tropics as well as it used to. At least that's what we could say that about these last couple of storms. But there's Franklin there turning to the right, and the GFS lifting it up into Georgia, then turning it to the right, and then bringing it offshore. And I'm going to come back to this because there's some more to it beyond that. But I want to go to the European, because the European model is pretty much in line with the hurricane tracking models, much further east. It doesn't seem to handle the depth, as also not handling the depth well for either system, Franklin or Idalia, or at least assuming that we're going to see that rapid strengthening. It brings it into the Florida Big Bend there, and then has more of a coastal track. It actually, the storm does weaken, but it's still carrying a 985 pressure when it's near Savannah come Wednesday night. So it might still be, I mean, at the very least, it'll be a strong tropical storm. It still might even be a minimal hurricane because its time over land is going to be kind of minimal. And
Right.
yeah, and then it straddles the South Carolina coast, showing pressures down in the low 980s, passing southeast of Hatteras and then turning to the east, and then eventually to the southeast as it moves out. Actually comes from going northwest to southeast. It would head right over Bermuda, but coming in from the other direction, which is a little bit unusual. But that's a long-term issue. We're not going to get into that too much tonight. But so there's a little bit of a spread here, and let's see if what we got with the aircraft recons. So we've got some. They're there in Adalia now. They're just getting into the center. I'm seeing the yellows on the graphic there with the plane on it. So that's 45 to 50 knots. It's probably not there at the center yet. And on the data time series, yeah, it's still not quite there. So these winds are up over 50 wherever it is. The winds are over 50 knots, and the pressures are around 999, 1,000 millibars. So it's not quite um, near where the center is. So we'll have to check this back. We'll check back maybe in about 10 or 15 minutes and see what it's got. Now let's go to Franklin. Mission 16, Joe. Mission 16. The first pressure read here, 927 millibars. So Joe said 926. I know this one might be a little bit behind. So this was taken at about 11 minutes ago. So they got a 927 pressure. So I don't know what they're carrying on the advisory. Can you check to see if the new advisory is out and see what they're carrying with wind?
I will check.
I wonder if they up the wind to 155 with another 10 millibar drop here.
Would they do that for an intermediate advisory, or not wait until? Because
oh yeah, if they got this, they didn't have this at 5 o'clock. So they got this now. They're going to update that to. They're going to update it. Oh, they're carrying 150, says Russ Niederman. For Franklin.
Okay, as of 8 p.m., 150. Minimum pressure 926.
Okay.
North at 8 knots, 9 miles per hour.
Unbelievable. Bob Paxton, thank you for hitting super chat. He says, let me check that my slow blower is starting. Never forget 78. He says, Bob's in another season, but we welcome that because soon enough we'll be there. All right, so strong category 4 here. It's got a few millibars to go and 6 miles an hour, and we may have a Cat 5. Out in the Southwest Atlantic. That would.
We don't get too many Cat 5s in the Southwest Atlantic, do we?
No. I don't remember. My memory's not good anymore. Years ago I could have told you when the last one was, but I can't do that now. and up close to 30 degrees north. Also, I mean it's we've had them down at 20. Irma, Maria, and so on. But this one's kind of pretty far north, almost to 30 degrees north. I can't imagine it's going to get much deeper. But you know what? The Gulf of Mexico is a bathtub. The most of the Atlantic is a bathtub. Right. So those couple of extra, more than a couple of extra degrees above normal, makes a huge difference. And Johnny Quest mentions Hurricane Dorian. Yes, correct. Hurricane Dorian was probably the last one, Joe. When it was sat over the island of one of the islands of the Bahamas for 2.5 days as a Category 5 hurricane with the pressure down. I think it was in the 890s, if I remember correctly. All right, so that takes care of Franklin. And all right, so let's go back to well, you know what? Just to keep things orderly, we'll come back to Adalia in a minute. And we'll see what they're doing with that. But let's go to there we go. Still see the tropical storm symbol. Oh, that's an old, I didn't refresh this. They're still saying Idalia, almost a hurricane near the western tip of Cuba. So they didn't they're waiting for the plane to get there. So they didn't change anything. That makes sense. And the forecast, because they do have tropical storm watches up for Bermuda, and why not? But you could see the forecast now, the turn to the northeast, keeping it a major hurricane as it passes north of Bermuda. So they have it as a major hurricane at 35 degrees north and about 66-ish west, and then running northeastward from there. Then it starts, it gets up to 40 north at about 57 or so, 57 and a half west. At that point, it's no longer a major hurricane. And of course, running up to the northeast, to the North Atlantic, they have it post-tropical by 2 p.m. on Friday. But nonetheless, I mean, this is pretty impressive to have something that strong. So if there's any doubt that the waters aren't going to get ripped up along the East Coast, you probably should wipe that doubt out of your mind.
Yeah, bring up a lot of upwelling. Excuse me.
Well, you know what? That might cool some of that water. So that certainly from over the track that this hurricane took, that water is going to be cooled off because of upwelling.
No question. By the way, Joe, familiar name on the chat board. I don't know if you took note of it.
Uh, no, I can't see
First
it.
name, first name is Brittany.
Oh,
And
dear Brittany, oh, there she is. It's Brittany Borer. Welcome, welcome. Nice to see you, Brittany. Hope everything is well. Brittany was a former colleague of ours at FiOS One News, and I hope you're doing well.
she's now moved over to the News 12. I see. So,
Oh, excellent, excellent. Good for you. Excellent. Yay. There's Idalia, 21.7, 85.1. So it's pretty much right near the western tip of Cuba. Top winds are 70 miles an hour. You can see the areas in red indicate the hurricane warnings. The areas in blue are tropical storm warnings. So we have tropical storm warnings up for southwest Florida. Looks like it goes pretty far south over Naples and Fort Myers. The Tampa Bay area is in the warning area because they're going to get some storm surge there to the right of that track. That water's just going to get pinched in right into the coastline, considering the angle that it's coming in. And of course, they have it as a major hurricane by 1 a.m. Wednesday. So probably maybe at this time tomorrow night it'll be a major hurricane. And then the official track is to take it to the South Carolina coast, just southwest of Charleston. So the yellow, those are tropical storm warnings that are up from the central Florida coast northward up into South Carolina, and more than likely they'll be extended further north up into North Carolina. Maybe tomorrow they'll do that once they get a good gauge about what this is going to do once it goes inland.
and my daughter is in Florida right now, and she is supposed to fly out back to New York on Wednesday morning. Now, originally she was supposed to leave at like noontime. She's moved her flight back about 6 hours. So she's supposed to leave from Orlando at 6 a.m. on Wednesday, and she's been calling Renata and I and saying, "So, what do you think the chances are of getting out?" And I told her, I said, you really ought to try and see if you can go to an airport that's further to the south and east, as far away from the track of the storm as possible. But instead, her carrier keeps saying, well, we can get you a flight on, and all of these flights that she was looking at, Jacksonville, Tallahassee. I said, they're putting you closer to the storm. What the heck is wrong with these people?
Yeah.
But at this moment in time, we have no idea whether or not she's going to be able to get off at 6 a.m. on.
Yeah, she
on
wants
Wednesday.
to go to Fort Lauderdale or Miami.
Well, she went to
West Palm Beach.
West Palm Beach. Unfortunately, they could not accommodate her in West Palm Beach. I'm not sure whether or not in West Palm Beach they don't have. She's flying on JetBlue, and I'm not sure whether or not it sounds crazy, man. JetBlue should be flying out of West Palm Beach, shouldn't they? But anyway,
honestly, I don't know.
Tomorrow night, if maybe I might call her. We'll put her on speakerphone, and we'll have a chat with her here on Joe and Joe, and she could describe what's going on down in Florida and her situation, and so we'll have a live update from somebody who is down near the path of this big storm, just like we had last year with that gentleman up in Nova Scotia.
Yes,
waiting that storm. So
yes. I just refreshed the Recon graphic for Adalia, and the plane has now made the left turn and going northwest. So it's approaching where the center is. And these red barbs that you see here, I don't see, these look like the lighter reds. It's like there's a slightly lighter red and a slightly darker red. In my eye, this all looks like this. There might even be a couple of darker reds in there. So that's 60 to 64 knots, southeast winds. So it's on the southeast side of the storm, and flying on up to the northwest. Junior on the chat board, good to see you there, Junior. I'm glad everything's okay. So as when it slows down at 35 and 70, I guess you're talking about Idalia. What does it do from there? Well, that's a good question, and I'm going to come back to that momentarily. And let's just see if they've got that graphic know if the Recon graphic where we get the flight level winds, see what they got. So they're up at about 65 knots at flight level, uh, at in this track that they're taking, but they're not near the center yet. So we're going to have to come back to that. I just want to show everybody the forecast tracks for Idalia, because it's kind of interesting, and then I can go back to what the GFS was doing with this today, which was also kind of interesting. So let's see current storms. So we've got Franklin. So let's just go to Idalia. And these are the hurricane model forecast tracks. And you see they're fairly tightly clustered, although there are a few of them that they're on the western side of that envelope. That's one thing, Joe. If it gets really strong, it may want to go a little bit more to the left. So that's something to consider, because a lot of times when storms get very intense, they go, depending on what the upper airflow is, they might lean a little bit more to the left, closer to where that trough axis is to the west. So I think that's something.
Rosenblum's rule, as
Yes.
it was.
Yeah, last night this morning was talking about the right rear quadrant. I was like, oh my God, it's it's snowstorm time. The vast majority of these take this to the right, and once it goes off the North Carolina coast and goes eastward. There's one weird model here that takes it off and then turns it south, and that is southwest, and then west back in off the Florida East Coast. Now, this was the 18Z. This was initialized at 2 o'clock. These maps come out at about 2. They come out very quickly, so they were out. They were usually up by 3 o'clock. So now we've got the 18Z GFS, which I want to come back to. And it's kind of interesting what this does, and the way this happens. And I'm going to use the eastern U.S. view here. So let's follow this along. You see Franklin there. Adalia is on the bottom middle, comes out into the Gulf, runs almost straight northward on the GFS, and then turns northeast, and then it moves out. Now, there's one thing on this, and this is why the GFS is going to do what you're going to see in a moment. If you look on the lower right, okay, it's just coming into the picture here, and I don't know if this is real or not, but there is some kind of probably a tropical depression that forms to the east of the Bahamas. I mean, it's almost northeast of the northernmost Leeward Islands there. It's at about 60 west and around, let's say, 25 or 26 or 27 north. I have no clue whether that's real or not, but the GFS putting that there, if you look on the upper right, you can just see the back edge of what's left of Franklin moving away quickly to the northeast. Yeah. So Adalia is kind of blocked here. If there's a depression that's sitting out there to its east, it's got no place to go. So it comes off, and now you see the closed isobars that are out there. It comes off and then drops southward and southwest. It still maintains a closed circulation, and then it moves it back over the state of Florida and into the eastern Gulf of Mexico again. Oh my God, this will be later next week. Then it brings a low, still has an identifiable closed low that comes ashore again in the Florida Big Bend. Now, I mean, the odds of that happening are very, very long. And it's all predicated on the fact that the model develops this depression, which the European doesn't do. If we look at the European takes it, it takes it out off the North Carolina, has a much further east track coming into Florida, and then it has it offshore south in North Carolina. It goes east. It doesn't really have that thing that's out there. So it drops it southeast of Bermuda, and then it turns it east and then northeast, and then it runs it out to sea. I mean, that to me seems a bit more likely than what the GFS has. But I'll tell you what, if something does wind up spinning up in the subtropical Atlantic at about 25 and 60, the GFS idea of that thing kind of looping back south or southwest is not it's not that crazy.
Well, it's going to, again, it'll be dependent upon whether or not it does form or whether or not. Now, is this what you're looking at right now? Is this the 18Z?
Yes, and the 12Z did no. This is the 12Z I'm looking
The
at.
12Z. Oh,
This is the
okay.
12Z. Okay, so now I know you're this is the 12Z European. The GFS the GFS I showed was the 18Z, I think, right? Yes. Yes, it was. But even the 12Z did something like this. So I'll just back it up to the 12Z map. And the 12Z map is, uh, it goes, still it's more left than any of the models. Comes out. You see that low that comes out on the GFS of the 12Z that comes out about 26 or 7 at about 60, and then it drives the Idalia southward and southwestward with a closed circulation over the state of Florida and actually takes it to New Orleans, whatever's left of it. I mean, it's far fetched, but if something does form out in the Atlantic like that, that's how you would get a crazy track.
A tropical dozy doe, if you will.
Yes. And of
Yes.
course, would be going over some of the same water that Franklin just went over, so it's going to be upwell to an extent. And then if it did this, it would come back to the other side where it upwelled that water in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So it's not going to have the high heat content that it has right now because
Right.
the eastern Gulf has been touched.
Right. So, ah,
Isn't
what
that
else?
lovely? All right, so let's do local, shall we?
Surely.
Yes. You know how to hit a cue when I give it to you.
Yes, I do.
All right, so let's look at the upper pattern because, of course, now that we're going into September, now we're going to get the ridge position in the eastern part of the United States, which we haven't seen all summer. But you have this. This is tomorrow. You have this trough that runs from northern Canada all the way down into the central Gulf states. Franklin's out here, Idalia's over here, and we've got the southwest flow, which means another approaching cold front. So I kind of just went with the idea, Joe, that there might be some scattered stuff running around tomorrow, and then maybe more numerous showers and thunderstorms for the overnight, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, or the front clears. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I had, you know, the precipitation threat. I think the best threat for precip probably is going to come after midnight tomorrow night and into early Wednesday, and there may be some rumbles of thunder there too. Tomorrow, I really wasn't sure about the timing of any precip that may affect us. I just simply said scattered showers tomorrow, and again, the highest probability I think for getting wet here will be late tomorrow night and early Wednesday morning. But after that, Joe, once we kick out the last of the showers early Wednesday, it looks like we're home free. We'll have dry weather for Thursday, for Friday, for Saturday, for Sunday, and even for Labor Day Monday.
Yep.
We got a long stretch of dry weather and increasingly warmer weather too.
Yeah. Now, Johnny Quest, you were asking earlier about whether Franklin does anything to the longer term pattern. I mean, looking at this, it doesn't seem to me that that's going to be the case because it eventually just gets absorbed by that big vortex that's up in the Davis Strait. Kind of swings around southeast of Newfoundland and then heads over to southern Greenland. You actually could still find an identifiable upper air feature when it goes into southern Greenland, and then it just sort of gets lost up there with everything else. But with lower pressures across the North Atlantic and Greenland and up in northern Canada, something we haven't seen virtually at all this summer, you can also see what happens at the same time as the trough pulls out. The heat ridge, which has been minimized down into New Mexico and North Texas, starts to expand again as we move through the latter part of next week and into next weekend. So this is the weekend. No, I'm sorry. This is Labor Day weekend. Take it back. This is Labor Day weekend. Okay,
Yes.
so yeah, you're going to see the ridge expand, and yeah, I mean it may not rain for quite a while in the eastern part of the United States if this is right, because this ridge in the east holds and extends down into Texas, so suddenly the trough is in the west, and it might not rain much at all next week if this is right.
Well, I'm sharing. I don't know if you can see it or whether I have to unshare and
No,
then
no, no,
reshare.
no. Hold on. I have to switch you. Um, hold on. Oh, come on. Why is this doing this to me?
I don't know.
Oh, good God. Hold on. Now you're on, and it's up on the air, so everything is working.
All right, so here's CPC, the Climate Prediction Center's 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook. I'll tell you right off the bat on the temperature outlook for both 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 days, with the exception of the far west. Everywhere else, it's above normal, probability of above normal temperatures, and especially so over the central part of the nation. But look at this. I'd say about, well, 2/3 of the country look to be in fine shape. When I say fine shape, some people say, well, how could you say that? We need the rain. No, we don't. Not especially up here in the Northeast. We've had our fair share.
Especially
So
up in northern New England.
yeah, and so finally, we're going to see a spell of dry weather. And as you can see here, Joe, from September 3rd to September 7th, they have virtually, well, I say again, 2/3 of the country in below normal probability for precipitation. It's only out over the Pacific Northwest, where it looks like there's going to be some wet weather or rainy weather to deal with. And then after that, that's 6 to 10 days. Let's check out the 8 to 14 day outlook. And you can see, yeah, basically the same story. Near normal over Maine and eastern sections of New England, but everywhere else below normal precipitation, taking us all the way out to the 11th of September. So it looks like for the first half of September, after we get past tomorrow or tomorrow night and early Wednesday, after that, we're going to be into a prolonged period of probably dry weather or very close to dry weather, save for maybe a renegade shower or two. But it looks like more often than not, we're going to be looking at dry conditions here, which, again, after what we've been through for most of this summer, a very soggy summer indeed in many places in the Northeast, especially as you said, Joe, up in northern section of New England. It's going to be a delight to have a stretch of 4 or 5, maybe 6 straight days or more of dry weather, and also temperatures that are going to be warming up. I was saying to Renata, here in the lower Hudson Valley, it looks to me like we're looking for temperatures on Saturday of 70, on average, within a degree or two, 79 Saturday, maybe 82, 83 on Sunday, 85 for Labor Day Monday. And it may only be at or even above that for a part of next week. So warm and dry, that's headed our way after and I'd be interested to see, Joe, the WPC precipitation map for the next 7 days. Probably a lot of front loading in the Northeast, considering what we'll be looking at between now and Wednesday morning. But after that, I think we're going to be seeing not much of anything in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast.
Well, since you asked for that map, I'm going to bring that map up. And there you go. So this is WPC's rainfall forecast. And of course, you see the big rains that are being indicated along and basically to the east of the track of Idalia, and then eventually the heavy rains will shift to the west side of the track once it gets up to Georgia and South Carolina and beyond. But there's a large stripe there in that orange area that's all 5 to 7, 5 to 10 inches of rain that runs up from the Big Bend of Florida across northeast Florida through southeast Georgia, the southern half of South Carolina, southeastern North Carolina. So very much, there's going to be flash flooding. What again prevents this from being, catastrophic rains that would be at least double this is the fact that it is going to be moving. So it's, they're going to get what they're going to get within a 10 to 12 hour time frame and then done. In the meantime, here in the Northeast, again, as Joe pointed out, very much front-end loaded with 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch for New England, down through eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Long Island. Some spotty holes where they have in Virginia where they got less. And it picks up again down the southern Appalachians to 3/4 of an inch to, looks like they even have 1.5 inches over me. I got 1.5 inches of rain yesterday. For the first time here in northeast Georgia where I am. for 2 weeks. We went without pretty much without a drop of rain. In the west, it's the monsoon up to the southwest and up to the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest, and that's evidence of the trough coming into the western part of the United States as well. But yeah, look at this big dry area covering much of the middle part of the United States from the Ohio Valley westward through the plains and then southward down into Texas. So when we look at this map in a couple of days, when we get rid of whatever we get tomorrow and tomorrow night in the Northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states, and of course once we clear out the rains from Idalia, you're going to see a very large area of white showing no rain, or at worst some of that light green, which is just a couple of hundredths in
Absolutely.
a few spots. So
Absolutely.
so there's that. The GOES satellite US loop here, where you can see both storms, Franklin and also Idalia, which is, you can see the outflow that's starting to become more impressive with the signature on the satellite there. We've got some thunderstorms. Actually, there's some over me or near me at the moment. They hold together. But you can see all the lightning strikes that were going on this evening from North Georgia down into southeast Louisiana. Not a whole lot happening in the plains. There's some high clouds streaming eastward, and we have some thunderstorms in the south, in parts of the Rockies, and down into parts of the Southwest. This is the radar as of. Let me freshen this up so I can get an idea if I'm going to have any rain here. And I mean, it's the radar showing some like a thunderstorm near me, but I'm not hearing anything. And even usually when there's like a heavy thunderstorm, even with my headsets, I can hear what's going on. Up in the Northeast, there's stuff offshore. There's some stuff up in northern New England and in Vermont and New Hampshire and over into upstate New York. Nothing much going on to the central and western part of New York. We're back into Pennsylvania. And then you got these storms in the southern Appalachians, North Georgia, into southeast Louisiana and Alabama. Then another gap, and then we've got some showers and storms with pockets of severe weather. By the way, speaking of severe weather, from our friends at the Storm Prediction Center, who we know are glued to this show, southeast Louisiana, northeast into North Carolina, the marginal risk tonight. So that's kind of playing out with what's on the radar. Tomorrow, we've got the marginal risk over all of the state of Florida and extreme southeastern Georgia, but a slight risk near the area where landfall may occur. And I'm sure this comes with a tornado risk. And it does, a 5% tornado risk there. And then we go to day 3 when everything shifts to the Carolinas. So this is Wednesday into Thursday. So northeast Florida, southeast Georgia, coastal South Carolina, and just touching southwest, southeastern North Carolina in the slight risk, with the marginal risk extending out into eastern North Carolina to the Outer Banks. So that pretty much makes sense with what we're seeing on the what we're seeing from the Hurricane Center. And by the way, this is a good time, I think, to remind everybody that for obviously everything you're seeing here, you're seeing it live, but if you're watching this on the replay later tonight or even on Tuesday morning, please go to NOAA, go to the National Hurricane Center website, nhc.noaa.gov, to get the latest weather information on what will probably be Hurricane Idalia by then. And also, as far as severe weather is concerned, you want to go to spc.noaa.gov for the latest on any severe weather. And always remember to go to your local National Weather Service forecast office for the latest information. All right, so on the surface map, you see the scattered storms during the day tomorrow, so who knows who gets those. They'll pop up here and there. Some of you will see them, some of you won't. Then tomorrow night into Wednesday morning, as Joe said, after midnight, there's a little disturbance moving northeastward along the frontal boundary. And then once that gets out, weather conditions improve. This nice high builds in. Idalia gets suppressed to the south. When we talked about what crazy thing the GFS does, but in New England, in the Northeast, northern mid-Atlantic states, back all the way west of the Mississippi, there's really not a whole lot going on. Looks like a front goes up into northern New England on Saturday with a couple of showers. And actually, Actually has a couple of showers late Saturday night, early Sunday morning coming down from the north if that little trough slash weak front is real. But who knows if that's the case. And then we go into Sunday, really not a whole lot going on in the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. Monday, Labor Day looks good. I actually already pushed it, Joe, into Wednesday and Thursday, and it shows very little in the way of rain. But it does show another tropical system forming off the southeast coast of the United States and moving northward and then turning straight to the east. So,
And the dew point temperatures are going to be soaring again for a brief time. Probably here in the Hudson Valley, Joe, we're looking at dew points tomorrow in the high 60s to even maybe near 70.
ew.
And up near 70 or upper 60s to around 70 tomorrow night. And then once we get the winds to flow out of a northwest direction on Wednesday, we'll see the dew points not drop instantaneously. It would be lovely if we could see them drop, like 20 degrees in 1 hour, but that's not going to happen. But we're going to start probably near 70 on Wednesday and then drop into the low 60s or near 60 by day's end, then into the 50s for Wednesday night. And then we're talking about dew points only in the 40s, probably for Thursday and for Friday. And boy, I myself can't wait for that. I mean, that's going to be one of those spectacular type of days where, you could just walk outside. Oh, wow, it's so wonderful to be outside. Wonderful to be alive. So hold on another few more days, but later this week, we'll see a big dip in the humidity and everything will be fine with the world, just as we're heading into, again, the last of the big summer weekends. We had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend with great weather from start to finish. It looks like the Labor Day weekend is going to be quite similar to that. Wonderful weather, except the humidity and the temperatures are going to be warming and rising later on Sunday into Monday. And that trend probably will continue into next week.
All right. 122 likes. We didn't even have to ask a second time. Thank you for those of you who have hit the like button, because we always love it when we go over 100. So it's 8:30 Eastern time. So it's time to do Briller Jeopardy. Are you all sitting down, ready to go? You got your thinking caps on, Mr. Rayo? Are you ready?
I am ready.
This is going to be a little bit. This might. I think that this is actually difficult. If you want my opinion, okay. So how many days does each of the following cities that I'm going to give you the average a clear sunny day? So we're talking about a clear sunny day during the month of August, which basically it's defined with less than 30% cloud cover.
Right.
So there could be a few clouds here and there, but if it's 30%, less than 30% cloud cover, we're calling it a clear day. So how many days do we see in these following cities? So let's start with Atlanta, Joe. Atlanta.
A clear sunny day?
Yes, in the month of August, which means that if you put a number over 31, okay, it doesn't work because there were only 31 days in August. So there is a limit here. All right.
Well, let's again point out, and you are more than aware of it since you're a stone's throw away from Atlanta, is the fact that almost daily there's going to be a buildup of convective clouds, and in some cases we're going to see some shower or thunderstorm activity. So to get a clear day down in Atlanta sounds to me like it's going to be a rather difficult task. But I will say, every once in a while, we get some anomaly and we get some dry weather and some lovely blue skies and such. So I'm going to say 4.
You're going to say 4. Okay. Well, before I give some of the chat boards, I'm just going to let Tim, a.k.a. Latex Dreams, the month of August, Tim, 31 days. So it can't be over 31. Right? Okay. So, Steve Lapointe said 12. Chuck Cardillo said 4, or 14. I can't see. Well, I'm going to say 4. It looks like he hit something on the keyboard that looks like a bracket. 4.
Chuck Cardillo 4.
Right.
Roman 10.
Go ahead.
Darnell Overton, 10. Latex Dreams says out of, what does it say?
Out of 365.
365.
Okay. Frank Scalera, 14. Helen Bertona, Joe. Helen Bertona has 8. 8.
And is that correct?
No, but Christopher Alley and Patrick Darcy have the correct answer. It is 7. Oh, and Maggie P. and William Uber and Rich Rothmansky also all had 7. The answer is 7.
Okay.
Excuse me. The next one on the list is Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Or, as I sometimes say, Buffalo.
Well, Buffalo can get under high pressure, fair weather systems from Canada more often than, let's say, Atlanta. So I'm just gonna simply take that 7 and raise you 7 and say 14.
14.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on for a second. What am I talking about? I said 14 would be more typical of, let's say, a month like October, as opposed to August. So I'll say 10.
10.
For
Tyler Fienga says 6. Michael McGuire says 13. Janet Dunn says 18. Michael Lazara says 19. Chuck Cardillo, 9. Patrick Darcy, 8. Sandy Blue Ocean, 13. Miss Fallerite, 13. Junior Ferrante says 10. Maggie P says 8. Quaalude Charlie, oh my God.
Quaalude Charlie?
9. Hello. And he must be new to the chat board because I've never seen this one before because I would have noticed it. Quaalude Charlie. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And like your name. No, Paul Roman, Joe. Paul Roman. It's the bullseye at 7.
Yeah.
So we had 7. Now the next city on the list is Salad, Texas. Or Dallas spelled backwards. Dallas, folks. Dallas. Okay. Steve LaPointe says 5. Rick B says 9. Rich Rothmansky says 15. Frank Scalera, 18. Michael McGuire, 15. Junior Ferrante, 5. Chuck Cardillo, 12. Janet Dunn, 9. Maggie P, 8. Carol DeCara, 6. Patrick Darcy, 14. Helen Bertona, 14. What say you, Joe Rayo?
I would have said a lower number. I would have said, you know what? I'm almost. Maybe the chairman tonight has decided to fool us and have all the cities at the same value.
Well, that's an interesting theory.
I'm going to say 7.
The theory doesn't play out, Joe. It's 15.
Really?
15, and so Michael McGuire and Rich Rothmansky getting it at 15. Now the next one is Denver, Colorado. So let me just write Denver on the chat. Okay, Denver, Colorado, folks. Denver, Colorado. Norm Roberts says 7. Steve LaPointe says 8. So what does Joe Rayo say?
14.
Joe Rayo says 14, which coincidentally is 2 times 7, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Quaalude Charlie, I love that name.
It's great, isn't it great? We get such a varied collection of folks here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Chris Alley has 10. 18 for Michael McGuire. Jr. has 17. You know what? I was doing 2 things at once. Okay, so I want to make sure I got the right number. Up, Christopher Alley. You hit it earlier tonight. You hit it early. You hit it again here. And Maggie P, Joe. Maggie P with 10. 10 for Denver.
Well,
and Quaalude Charlie also got 10. And Patrick Darcy also got 10. All right. I thought this was really kind of hard, actually. One more. Okay? One more, and that is Fresno, California. I wonder how many sunny days they have in August in Encino.
Well,
that's an old match game joke, but go on. Fresno.
How about 20?
How about 20? Well, Rich Rothmansky said 26. Michael McGuire says 29. Christina Pedia says 25.
Now wait a minute. Now anyway, says 29. You're talking about virtually the entire month.
Well, it's
Here.
California. It's interior California, Joe. It's not impossible.
Well,
Frank Scalera 25.
except this year.
Miss Fallerite 20. Miss Fallerite had 18. Norm Roberts 22. Lulu Bell 28. By the way, thank you, Lulu Bell. I saw you hit super chat earlier. You hit the tip jar. Thank you so much for doing that. Darnell Overton 20. Renata Rayo says good night. Tyler Fienga says he's raising his initial guess now to 22. Chuck Cardillo 24. Christina Pedia, Joe, and Frank Scalera 25. A quarter. 25. Now, while everybody was guessing Denver, I was just moving around on my screen to see if we've got anything new with the Recon from Idalia. But the plane decided to go straight west and now is going up, flying north on the western periphery. So I guess it's going up and about to come over the top. It's taking a weird flight route. So we're not going to have a verdict here while we're on with regards to whether Idalia is a hurricane, but for the 11 o'clock advisory that the Hurricane Center puts out, we'll know one way or the other. So, any final thoughts, Mr. Rayo?
No, none. We'll be back tomorrow and talk more about the hurricane situation. Maybe I'll even get my daughter to come on and tell us directly what's happening in Florida. And hope everybody has a good night.
All right. The Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing weather network on the planet. Check it out. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board, and it's also on the descriptor to this video. If you do decide to make a purchase from the Tempest website of anything on there, use the coupon code. Use the referral link and then the coupon code I want a weather station. And if you do, Joe Rayo, as only Joe Rayo can tell you, you get
10% off.
And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town on any of your hardware or landscaping needs. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Okay.
And let's thank again Ken Musillo, Johnny Quest, Bob Paxton, Lulu Bell 2222, and especially Frank Carajet. Frank hit the tip jar not once but twice tonight. 2 very generous donations. Right. So thank you, Frank.
And Lulu Bell 2222 should not be confused with Alexander 4444.
4444.
The line is busy. Good night, everybody.
Good night.